Welcome to another episode of the Baseball Grind. I am your host, Francisco Castro. This podcast is partnered with More Than Baseball. More Than Baseball is working daily to better the lives of minor leaguers all over baseball. Check them out at morethanbaseball.org. All right, speaking of More Than Baseball, I'm super excited for my guest today. I finally got him on. He was drafted originally by the Yankees from Texas. He is one of the co-founders of More Than Baseball, executive director of More Than Baseball. Slade Heathcott, how's it going, brother?
How are you, man?
Man,
Appreciate it. On.
yeah, like I said, I've been trying to get you on. We finally made it happen.
Been bad.
No, it's all good. I've had Jeremy on, I've had Simon on, and now I feel like the trifecta of More Than Baseball is complete. Like I can die happy now.
Well, you saved the best for last. That's what it is.
Naturally, the best for last. I figured, they set the table, and then you kind of just,
Right.
go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how have you been?
Busy, which is good. It's been a awesome couple of months.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can't wait to talk about that. We're going to dive all into the unionization of the minor leaguers, more than baseball, everything about that. Before we do that, for those who may not know about you and kind of who you are, kind of give us like a brief detail of kind of like your background from like high school baseball to like where you at now to where you're at now, I guess.
Yeah, that could be a 2 hour conversation in itself. Very high level. I was born in Louisiana. My family's from Oklahoma, which is where most of them are now.
Okay.
So I was born in Louisiana, moved to Oklahoma, and going into the second grade, prior Oklahoma specifically, and then ended up going to Bixby, Oklahoma, and then I graduated for high school. I went to Texarkana. Um, and when I got there, I growing up, I played every sport that I could, right? And then as I got a little bit older, it kind of goes narrowed down to football, baseball, wrestling, a little bit of boxing, things of that nature. And then once I hit high school, it was football, baseball. That's really all I did, and had time for. And it was good. And we moved away from Bixby. We went to Texarkana, one for a job for Red River, but also to get into the football program at Texarkana.
Was their
They had
football program one of the better football programs in Texas?
it was good for also being coincidentally really close to where a new job opportunity was for my mother.
Okay.
So it just kind of was a two-way street that worked out really well. So we moved there going into my freshman year.
Mhm.
I was a runt my freshman year. Like I uh I was super young. So when I started school in Louisiana, I started at 4. So I actually did the 8th grade twice,
Okay.
which was great though because I got to take the classes ahead the next year.
Mhm.
So even though I did the 8th grade twice, for like hold me back to get age wise for sports, of course,
Yeah.
um, that put me way ahead, like school wise.
Oh,
So
sweet.
so when I went into my freshman year, I was already taking sophomore classes and things. So I was always ahead, which made it nice at the back end of my high school. Yeah, I started at football, baseball. I wrestled in the 97-pound group my second grade, 8th grade year. So I was a runt, and I took a growth spurt my sophomore year, and then another one my junior year. But I had a very interesting high school, man. I a long story short, my dad ended up getting into like hooked into drugs really bad, things of that nature, ended up becoming like in and out of jail, things of that nature. And going into my junior year, my mother had didn't have a great relationship with him one way or the other, and I'd moved to Dallas, and we hadn't really talked. So I was living with friends in Dallas for the summer, playing actually under Rusty Greer, uh, Dallas guy, or Rangers guy, and he was a big part of kind of my development as a player. So it was really good. But I came back to Texarkana, and my mom had moved. And a lot of people, when I say, so I actually graduated living out of my truck. My last 2 years, I was bouncing around living in my truck and living with friends and things of that nature, and really kept it hidden that that I was living out of my truck.
Yeah.
And people were like, "Oh," and I'm like, "No, I was a high school kid that had no rules and handled it my business and showed up to school." But that became big because my junior and senior year, I didn't really have to take many classes, so I took advanced classes and things of that nature because my plan, I took advanced classes in math all the way through because my real plan was to get my aeronautical science degree and apply for a flight spot in the Air Force. That was my plan in high school. Because my freshman and sophomore year, I was on varsity and everything, but I was tiny. Just didn't. I wasn't the like typical path of somebody that would later be a first rounder. I was a 50-50 commit to LSU for tailback and as a pitcher, really, and two-way guy in baseball. So my junior summer, I moved back to Dallas and I started creeping up. Like I was starting to be in the like 94, 95 range. I was touching it.
In
And I was like, all right, yeah, from the left side. So I'm
wow.
like, all right, so like yeah, I'm gonna be a pitcher. Like that was my plan. So my senior year, I tore my ACL with 3.5 months before the draft, or 6 months before the draft. Sorry,
Yeah.
6 months before the draft. And I somehow I got back and recovered and was playing in games at 3.5 months.
Jeez.
Um, and my final appearance, so I wasn't able to pitch. I couldn't. Dr. Andrews did my surgery,
Hmm.
and I came back at 3 months for my checkup, and he was like, "Hey, you can't start practicing. That won't even be considered until like 4.5 months." And I was like, "Doc, like that's not gonna work. Like, I've got the draft in 6 months, and I'm having like my junior summer. Like I had every team, every college, things of that nature. So I was like, that's not."
At that point, like, were you thinking like first round, or were you thinking like top 10, top 15?
At that time, I was
Yeah.
thinking top. At that time, once I tore my knee, I pretty much knew I was a first rounder.
Okay.
At least the conversations, like I knew the slot that I was going to be going for. And I still remember that day when I'm living out of my truck, and I had just left. I worked 2 jobs. I mowed yards, and I helped run a baby care or babysitting, like child care center,
Yeah.
after school program. And I had just gotten off. It was like 7:30, and the guy that I was talking with that I wanted to be my advisor at that time because they can't be an agent,
Yeah.
was like, "Hey, we're gonna ask for 2.2 million." I was like, "All right,
All
Derek,
right.
you're funny." So I was like, "What am I really looking at?" And he goes, "I'm serious. We're going to ask for that." And I'm like, "I've got $12 in my bank account." So okay. So I mean, and that was, I mean, it was a cool moment. But yeah, I tore my ACL. I went to Andrews 3 months out. He's like, "This isn't gonna work," and I was like, and he wouldn't budge. He was like, "No," and I was also committed to LSU, his Armada, so like that probably had something to do with it as well. But 3 months is extremely early to come back from ACL. Um, and the team was doing decent, pretty well. And when I got back, we went on it. I would have put our, and everybody says this, but I would have put our high school team with the best team. We had 3 lefties over 90. 3 guys got drafted. All 9 guys, or 9 guys went D1.
That's crazy.
Were better. Like we were good.
Texas is a pretty like they have a lot of baseball talent coming out of Texas nowadays, especially. But
Yeah,
uh,
because they come year round, right?
yep,
Depending on areas and stuff like that. And it's really just, I think like Dallas has a lot of professional culture in it as well. And I believe
yeah,
that cities are like that, do have tendencies to promote and create accessibility to more or better coaching. That's really what it comes down to. I truly believe it is better coaching at the developmental ages that really impact lives. But yeah, they do. Like our football team was really well. We got beat out in the second round of the playoffs that year. I went down our sixth game or fourth game, maybe.
wow,
Um, but yeah, so I came back and I'm looking at the doctor's note, and he like kind of wrote it at an angle, and the no pitching part went through the black lines, but the no fielding and hitting was above the line. So, and I told Dr. Andrews this like 6 years later. I was like, "Hey Doc, you know that I forged your note one time." I whited out
yeah,
the line and rewrote it to the best ability. I scanned it and I turned it into the school, and I started practicing at 3 months out,
wow.
playing scrimmage games. and I definitely wasn't 100%. Like I definitely was not. Should not have been on the field.
Yeah.
I end up getting a couple of cortisone shots to be able to get me through that point.
What
But
was his reaction when he told him?
I don't think he was surprised because at that time I had like 7 surgeries with him,
Okay.
6 surgeries with him. So like I know Dr. Andrews decently well at that
Yeah.
point. Especially because I did my rehab with him as well. So I spent a lot of days with Dr. James Andrew. Um, so yeah, we keep winning. We get into playoffs. I'm still not pitching, and that's what I'm planning on doing. I've been to, like, there's heavy conversations with the Baltimore Orioles. They had a supplemental first that they could double their slot on, and that's where it was pretty evident that that's where I was going to go. Just driving conversations and things with other teams, and there was a lot of debate outfield or pitching, like which one do we want to do. I was a two-way guy in the Aflac All-American game. Should have probably had the MVP, and then I blew the save.
Dang. In the
But
playoff game, you blew it or what?
now in the Aflac All-American game.
Okay.
But yeah, so we get into playoffs. We're in the finals now. We're driving through Baylor. We do practice at Baylor, and I had driven overnight to Arkansas to get a cortisone shot, and I drove to meet the team.
Wow.
And really didn't tell anybody but Caleb Adams, a buddy of mine that ended up playing, one of the guys on the team that ended up playing with the Angels organization. So the day before we go into state championships is the draft. And we showed up, we finished the practice at Baylor, got into Round Rock. We were playing at the Round Rock Stadium for the championship. And we got in at 5 or 6, whatever time it was, and the draft was just starting. And turned the computer on. All the guys from the team huddled around, and we watched it. And about 18, 19 picks in, I get a call from Damon Oppenheimer. Hey Slade, we're letting you know we're going to take you with our first round pick.
So sick.
We're gonna draft you as an outfielder. And I was like, all right.
Yeah. What was
uh,
that feeling like when you look in your bank account? You're like, all right, I got $12. And then now you're like, all right, I just got a huge signing bonus. Now I'm pretty much set like for life.
I think that it doesn't, like anything and everything. There's not no way to describe it because there's not. It's very surreal, I guess is the best way, because it's just that's not fathomable. But like at that time in my life, like that the understanding of what this means, besides the fact that I get a chance to be a big leaguer, like that was really my focus. Still was like this is an opportunity to complete a dream that I've had since I was 5 years old. So it was crazy. And we go out the next day. And we're winning 3-1, I believe. And the coach in the like fifth inning was like, "Hey, next inning, I want you to get warm. You're going to close the game out." I'm like, I haven't thrown a bullpen all year. My last pitching appearance was when I blew a save at the Aflac All American game on national TV
Yeah.
at 16. I'm like, I haven't thrown all year. Ended up striking the first guy out, uh, flew out, and then a ground ball to shortstop, and we won. So we won a state championship and got drafted in a matter of 2 days. So like that's still, I mean, those are memories you don't forget, right? Like it was spent with my family, which was the baseball team. It was a dream come true.
Yeah.
So that's my very long-winded
Yeah.
background, and yeah, I
No,
mean,
that's awesome. Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. And like,
that's up to high school at least.
yeah, no, we'll go deeper, but I wanted to know about like high school in Texas. You mentioned you played football, and like the only like I have family in Texas, and Texas has always like fascinated me with like just watching Friday Night Lights. And is it just like that? Like, because I've driven by that area where it's taking place. Like, is that how it is? Like, is it such a huge deal? I guess like compared to like
Yeah.
other states and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we would have. I mean, we had a $200 million indoor football facility. Yeah, like yeah, I mean that's what it's like. There's tons of. I'd say we have anywhere between a big game, we'd have 13,000 plus fans in a high school
Wow.
game. So yeah, I mean it's the hype, it's everything in school. The teachers love you if you're a football player, at least most. Um, it's exactly what you see.
That's crazy. So
Yeah.
how is it then? Like, what advice would you have maybe for somebody who is because you were kind of hyped up as a football player and a baseball player, obviously first rounder. Is that good? You tell me. But like, what advice would you give for somebody who's maybe looking toward that direction of maybe getting drafted either out of high school or even out of college?
Oh man, this is a very interesting topic because I now work in the space of transitioning professional athletes and veterans and things of that nature for my full time outside of more than baseball. And it's a very interesting time period where I'm at now. But where I sit now in kind of this realm, if I was very fortunate, my situation, you sign a contract and you go.
Hmm.
Like you don't pass up that opportunity in life. Where it's challenging is when you start talking about where the majority of people sign for.
Yeah.
That's the problem is first rounders sign for a lot and are giving a lot more opportunity than they probably shouldn't, including myself. So seeing guys sign out of high school for $20,000 or $15,000 or even $100,000, right? Like you're giving 40% back, you're giving 5% to your agent. Oh, and you're going to make $6,000 your first year in professional baseball.
Yeah.
They don't tell you that stuff, right? Like my very first year in 2010, 2009, I only played like 2 games. It was like it was when you could sign late. But yeah, like my very first year in Charleston, 2010, I made $6,600 total. That was before they paid for living. That was before they paid for equipment, things of that nature. So those are the things they don't tell you. And at that point, I think the highest you could make in AAA was 12,000.
Yeah.
So those are the things they don't. So when I see guys do that, I'm just like, and knowing how hard it is to leave the game
Hmm.
behind the curve in business, taking that into account now and having a better understanding and realization to the realities of life outside of sports, because it is different, whether people want to say that's a privilege thing or not, it is different and it comes with its own sets of challenges.
Sure.
So when I see that, I'm like, I want kids to go to college, or if you're going to play, make sure that the idea that you can't have a plan or that plan B takes away from plan A is just not true. It's not true in the game. So like, I don't ever want to tell somebody not to follow their dreams because I was told hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times that I would never play. Right. You'd never go to the next level, or you're not good enough, or you're too small. So I never want to tell somebody not to follow their dreams. But what I want them to do is listen.
Hmm.
I want them to listen. I want them to ask questions to people around them if they don't know who to go to. That's why more than baseball, we do help give it at least advice and guidance to give a realization of what minor league baseball is and what it looks like in reality. And that's been one of our missions there for a while. But ask questions
Hmm.
and listen. People come and talk to you and they say school is important. And look, school is not a definite that you have to like have this to be successful in life, but it definitely teaches you and gives you transferable skills into the business world that professional sports doesn't necessarily do.
Hmm.
Realize that the people you meet later in your life can be very valuable. Truly care about who people are. If you can do that and have a network when you leave the game, and have a good heart and you are honest, people see through bullshit, right? Like that's just people see through it nowadays. So if you're genuinely there to help people and to use your platform to do good,
Hmm.
have plan B. Be working on plan B. There's time to have jobs. There's time to build something. There's people in your network that you're going to cross that might do it. Just always have plan B brewing and building relationships. So that way, when the game ends, and sometimes that's very unexpected.
Yeah.
Right? Like I knew mine was coming because I was pressing buttons of ownerships. Um, and you know what? I don't at now like that was what cool about the unionization. We'll get to that is like I stepped away from this game on purpose and pushed buttons to be blacklisted, right?
Yeah.
But my advice is to listen, to ask questions, to think about not 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years. Think about whether you want a family, things of that nature. Like it's a very mature decision at a very young age, and ask for help. That's the best thing because there's a lot of people out there that can help you understand what this life is like. Make sure that you have a plan to start doing school while you're in,
Yeah.
like things of that nature. Just have plan B. That's my biggest advice. Have plan B and ask questions.
Yeah, you never know when your season's going to be over and your baseball's done. And for so many guys, like baseball is all they've known from like, literally to like high school and college and professional baseball. And then if that's taken away from them, then like that's their whole identity. Like, what do they have next? So like I love what More Than Baseball is doing, kind of giving that guidance and like just like coaching and like mentoring even like some of these younger players in the game to kind of like take that next step after baseball. So I heard from Simon about how his version of like why he got into More Than Baseball, and also Jeremy. But like for you, like you talked about getting blacklisted, and I think it was when you were with Oakland. Shout out to the A's. That's actually my home team growing up. I grew up in Oakland, so like I was an A's fan since a kid. But that being said, what was kind of like leading up to you starting the whole idea of More Than Baseball?
Um, very first person I ever talked to about this was Cameron Lowe, which is crazy. I just had breakfast with him about 2.5 weeks ago now, and we were talking about this. It was 2016. I was with the White Sox. I was an MLB free agent or MLB free agent, so it didn't really affect me at all, and it didn't affect me at all, right? Like I was the bonus baby that didn't have to deal with any of the BS that players have to deal with. And let's not even say BS, let's say challenges,
Sure.
right? Like the challenges that are faced and going after this dream. Um, so yeah, I had 7 surgeries in my career. I was hurting extremely bad every game. I had gotten it manageable, and I was doing that. I finally started getting my stuff back, but it just frustrated me to see how guys were treated.
Yeah.
And like we're paying clubhouse dues, and we're paying for rent and housing, and that was like my first time where I started a business in 2015, and was like starting to learn a little bit more about it. And I'm like, okay. And then really what escalated was the America's Pastime Act.
Yep.
Like when that happened, I was in 2018 spring training, one of my probably better spring trainings of my career. I was feeling good. They had moved me to first base. I played every single game of MLB spring training. And one time, and I don't remember the exact date, but a press article was released, and I think it was like maybe Jeff Papson or somebody like that, reporting the America's Pastime Act had been pushed through lobbying, and I had been tracking it for a while. And I made a comment on social media. This is BS, because and really, like I think the ultimate deal is I just hate when people are taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Like I just morally in every fiber I have, like I just can't stand when people are treated like they're less, because we're all on this rock together and we're all made of the same stuff, and it really bugs me. So when I saw, and personally, it was a disrespect to me. I'm a minor league baseball player, and they're calling me a seasonal intern. I worked my ass off for 20 years to get to this point, and I'm called a seasonal intern. And that rubbed me wrong. And anybody that knows me knows that. And I've learned how to do it the right ways now. I'm not scared to put my foot down,
Yeah.
no matter how big you are, no matter who you are. And that has positives and that has negatives for personal things that I've had to learn and get through. But I got warned, and
Who warned you? Was it like your organization or like baseball in general?
let's just say the grapevine.
Okay.
Let's say the grapevine. I got warning not by one, not by two, but by multiple, including veteran players.
Hmm.
Um, and I was like, this is how I feel, man. Like, this is not like, it also was like a slap in the face because they deducted $50 from the pay scale. And it's just like you added all that together. And I'm like, this is just, it's unjust. Like
Yeah.
anybody that wants to argue that this isn't unjust, okay, like you honestly like are not on my radar ever. It's just if that's the way you feel, like wake up. Like it's the same conversation you see, right? Like MLB does a really good job of promoting the $400 million contracts, so
Yeah.
everybody thinks everybody's getting millions and millions of dollars, and that's just not the reality. So I did it on May 19th, I think 18th or 19th, I posted again. There was another article and I posted and I was in AAA with Nashville at that time, first month of the season, pretty well, nothing crazy, 280, but had a lot of doubles and things of that nature and was playing pretty well. They I posted again. I came in the next day and I won't say who I sat down. I sat down with two people this time. And they're like, "Hey, just want you to know that you're ruffling feathers at up top, and we've been told to like make it aware." And the very smart and mature person I was at the time told them to take whoever it was, and I knew who it was, or at least I had an idea of who it was,
Yeah.
and shove it up their ass. And on May 20th, I was on a flight home.
Jeez.
I was called that night at like 12. I was like, "Hey, you have a flight at 8 a.m. You're done." And I was like, "You can take your own flight."
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was there and I waited and waited and there's plenty, right? Like I was also hurting really bad at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like and there's a lot, like the game was getting so damn good. Like it's crazy how good guys were getting. So there was a multitude of reasons why, but yeah, I waited and waited. I even offered to find once I had an idea of what was going on. I was like, "Look, I'll sign for the lowest contract you've ever had. Just whatever, pay me the minimum, a minor league minimum." So I'd have been made like $6,000.
And they wouldn't do it.
Nah, no one. There was not one offer. Do I have proof? No, but I know the system well enough to know
Yeah.
what happens. I attempted indie ball for a couple of weeks and it just was not for me. And I also know the manager there and the relationships they have with all the front offices. And I went to indie ball and I was they wanted my name on I should have never said yes. I said yes. My name was on a roster, couldn't get my name off that roster, and they weren't playing me.
It was almost kind of like free publication or free press for them to kind of be like, we have a former first rounder on here kind of thing.
No, no. I believe that the manager was specifically told because I did not play in indie ball.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I didn't play in indie ball, and only thing that I could do was sit there. And if I left, then I'm on the restricted list. So I'm technically still on the restricted list.
Like even now?
Yeah, it probably has a statute of limitations, but yeah,
Yeah.
like for the first like 3 or 4 years after retirement, I was on the restricted list because I left a contract without it being completed.
That's crazy.
So yeah, but yeah, so that was why I just was frustrated with it, and my plan in 2016 was I'm going to get back to the big leagues, and then I'm going to stand up and I'm going to get involved with the MLBPA, and I'm going to learn as much as I can, and I'm going to figure out how to change this because there's no reason why. If you look at MLB's path line or like path, they're always on a 15-year plan. They are, right? Like, and I know that more now just working with big banks and Fortune 1,000 and 500 companies, right? Like they always are on a 15, 20-year plan, right? Like you don't have a collection of billionaires not on the same page, right? Like they are. So there's just a lot of things in that area that were just planning, and I just never got to that point. Jeremy reached out to me when I was in Sugarland and was like, "Hey, I saw your post. I've been following you. Like, I really appreciate what you're doing. I'm really passionate about this as well.
Yeah.
Would you jump on a phone call with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And he called, and I was like, we were talking. We were on the road. We were in Yorktown, I think Yorktown, yeah, something like that. And I sat outside and we talked for about an hour and a half. And by the end of the call, he was like, "I have a name that I like." And I was like, "All right, what do you got?" And the whole mission was to build a collection of players that we could help
Yeah.
now, like right now. And that's really like the founding part of it. Me and Jeremy just talking that one time on the call. We kept talking, we kept going. He told me More Than Baseball was a name. I was like, hell yeah, I'm in. I love the
Yeah.
name, love what it stands for. And we started, and we had no clue what we were doing. Absolutely no clue. And that was in 2018,
Yeah.
early 2018. And we talked and talked and talked for 9 months or so, we started filling out the paperwork. Simon got connected to us probably 6 months in, maybe a little bit later, and was such a big piece of the team.
Mm-hmm.
Me and Jeremy are like, he should be a co-founder. So
Yeah.
we made Simon a co-founder early 2019, officially at least. And then COVID hit, which is crazy. So, and that's more than baseball side. But our goal was to help players to create programs that create change for the systematic approach of baseball, not just for your career, but after your career.
Yeah.
And most importantly, after your career. I was fortunate enough to be locker mates with some really awesome veterans. And talking with Andy Pettit one day when it was Andy Pettit and Mariano Rivera.
That's so
Uh,
cool.
yeah, it really is. It really was. It was. But talking to him, he came back from retirement that year, and he just kept saying, and now that I work in the space, I hear it unanimously, right? I hear it from Michael Strahans and people of that nature and caliber, right, in other sports, but just missed the team.
Yeah.
Missed that mission. You missed having that mission made you disciplined.
Yep.
And you understood it. You're comfortable with it. You had bled this, so it doesn't matter how much money you have. That transition is tough.
Yeah.
So
So you had mentioned COVID and kind of threw a wrench and everything. More Than Baseball did a ton of work for minor leaguers during that time. Do you think that like having baseball taken away from them like so suddenly kind of like made them realize how much like not necessarily they need more than baseball, but how much like there is a need for like the minor leaguer like to get like assistance and just like better their life in general?
I think it played a very, very big piece of that equation. I think it also made players, for a lot of players, there's never been anything else.
Hmm.
And I think COVID forced them to have something else. It forced them to go out and get jobs,
Yeah.
right? Like then normally they'll work part-time jobs or things of that nature. But in that situation, a lot of players end up just having to go get full-time jobs. And now they're realizing I can do a very entry level
Hmm.
or an entry level job and I make 5 times more doing this. And I think it made players take a step back and just realize the realities of life
Yeah.
without the game of baseball. And I think from that standpoint, players are like, well, maybe me losing the game isn't the biggest thing in the world, right? Like if it asks that question of identity and start asking yourself, what's next? I
Yeah.
experienced that very much so when I started having surgeries. It was the first time that I had to step back and watch the game, and that ended up leading to me, starting college and getting into flying, and eventually getting my commercial instrument license. Right, so I think stepping away from the game just opened their eyes to a bigger world than just a uniform.
Yeah, and I don't think fans, and I say this all the time on my podcast, I don't think fans fully understand the grind that baseball players go through to make it to the major league, right? They see the final product of like that major leaguer on their favorite team, but then they don't take a step back and realize like that guy might have been in minor league, indie ball. Like I talked to a guy, Jared Koenig. He is with the A's, like I said, my favorite team growing up, and he was in indie ball, and then Australia, then signed to a minor league contract, and then he made his major league debut this season. And
Um,
like that story, like people don't see all that grind and hustle and struggle. That's why I renamed my podcast the Baseball Grind, because like I'm showing and trying to emphasize like the struggle that guys go through in order to make it to the majors. So like what you guys are doing, like you're doing an absolutely like an amazing job. You guys, advocates for minor leaguers, adopt a minor leaguer, all these organizations out there that are kind of now switching and making a change. On that note, let's talk about the unionization of the minor leaguers. I know you posted on Instagram like a really heartfelt, thoughtful like post on that when that just finally happened. But for those who don't know about it, like maybe just kind of break it down in like simple layman terms. Like what's that going to mean for the minor leaguers now?
long story short, Probably realistically 3 years down the road. A lot of what we did during COVID, we issued the foundation of More Than Baseball wasn't created to give grants away.
Hmm.
Right? That wasn't our goal and mission. We we had the opportunity to bring in a large sum of money from a collection of major league players that wanted to, and some corporations that wanted to help minor leaguers right now. That gave us the ability to collect data on about 3,000 players. And what that did was it was the first time that we didn't assume what minor leaguers wanted, but actually had something tangible to show what really matters to minor leaguers. Um, the big piece of that was nobody had really looked at how do you get a collection of players together. Right. Just we were just talking about COVID. And I think this helped big is it made players step away from the game, realize that there is more to life. So they were less fearful to stand up and take a stance because that was the issue all along.
Yeah.
There's been 5 or 6, 7 groups now that have stood up to try to create a better system for minor league baseball. Now, unions or words are used and things of that nature. I never cared what the organization was called. What we cared about was that the systematic change was implemented. And part of that data is we have a livable wage. We know a number realistically that every minor leaguer should get paid. And we believe that's around $34,000. That can be spread out over 12 years or 12 months. That can be spread out over 7 months, like it is now, right? Like there's two different things. But a livable wage across the country, when taking in account of housing and things of that nature, that's we pay for all of our own equipment. We pay for all of our food, things of that nature that a lot of companies, when they go on a business trip and things like that, it's covered, right? Like your expenses are covered. That's just not the reality in baseball. So it was a long road, but the whole point of that, we always approached it from the stance of how do you make players better? Because what do teams ultimately care about? You cut it through all the layers and fat and things of that nature, and it'll come down to ultimately they want to win games because winning games that produces
Money. Yeah.
like that's the deal. The second part of that and the story that doesn't get told is and these are dated numbers to 2019. Haven't seen new numbers since just with COVID and everything. But in 2019, Major League Baseball made $12.7 billion in revenue.
Wow.
They had
It's a lot.
25, yeah, they had 25,000 different contractors, employees across the entire year. MLB in 2019 could have paid all the salaries of every four. Hey, I'm on here. The wife just got home.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so they could have paid everyone. They could have paid all 25,000 employees and all 40-man contracts. Those 25,000 employees could have gotten paid over $200,000 a piece.
Wow. It's crazy.
And still been in the green.
Yeah.
So it's been a long road to get to that point. There's you mentioned multiple groups there, right? About the minor leaguer, minor league advocates, ourselves. There's been individuals, there's been companies. It's been a collective effort to get to this point. And our mission and statement has always been how do we make better baseball players, but not just better baseball players on the field, but after the game leaves. How do we build systems that allow players to transition easier?
Yeah. And so now that like the union is happening, and I feel like that's definitely a win for everybody. Like, what is maybe like the next, not the next step, but like what is More Than Baseball working on now? Like, what is like your focus, or like maybe future plans on how to and continue to help minor leaguers?
Well, one, not to forget about the Latin American players.
Yeah, for sure.
Unfortunately, in this agreement, the Latin American players in the DR will not be a part of this organization, which has kind of always been known. Being an advocacy group in a sense to be able to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that they have the lives right. Like we've started, so our focus has moved into youth baseball, and really more so the ecosystem around youth baseball. How can we partnered with an organization down in the DR called the Baseball Island Foundation.
Yeah.
And the whole purpose of that is we are sponsoring a lunch program. So every year, well, this year's our first year. We're hoping to raise enough money to keep doing it. But what we've done is we partnered with an academy that has younger kids in the Dominican Republic uh, going to a school. And we will pay for all their lunches throughout the entire course of the year on the agreement that they attend English class. They do a beach cleanup and learn about sustainability and take our certification with another partnership with Players for the Planet.
Mm-hmm.
They attend the beach cleanups and they have to have attendance at school. And if they do those four things and check off, we pay for their lunches. And the whole point of that is when you look at college education, if 10 million people, if 25% of baseball from 10 million people in the Dominican Republic, how many of those kids could get into college on a scholarship? And give themselves a different life than they'd ever be able to have in the Dominican Republic, or get their degree and go back home and help support their family, right? Like we learned data during COVID that the average Latin American player is supporting 4 people.
Yeah.
The average American player is supporting about 1.3, 1.4 people. So there's a big gap there that should be labeled, and that's not because of the stereotypical reason in the United States, right? Like people just supporting it. It's because that's the culture. The culture in the Dominican Republic is everybody comes together to make sure that the family is good. So like if we could implement, and one of the hurdles of why Buscones don't go after college scholarship plans for Latin American players is because they can't pass an ESL program, right? Like they can't pass a language test to get into college. If we can implement and use the game of baseball and the megaphone of the DR to make kids at the age of 8 go and get English and start taking English classes in the hopes of being able to get into college and use their skill in baseball to get that college scholarship, that's our goal. Is how do we take our platform as players and make sure that we're not just looking at the minor league system now, but now we're looking at the ecosystem of baseball at more of a grassroots level. And that's our mission. Is we want to be able to help minor leaguers and continue to build programs, run programs, and assist players. But now let's look at also how can we take those players. We know that 20% of players leave the game and get back into coaching. My big mission right now, my big focus with More Than Baseball is I believe that if we want to rebuild baseball and stop it from dying, because it is at about 4.5% a year, right? It's dying.
Yeah, for sure.
If we want to look at that, we have to look at coaching. We have to look at, and I'm not talking about coaching at the professional level at all. I'm talking about the moms and dads that are teaching Little League, right? And what I've seen the last 5 years traveling around running fundraisers. One of the things that we do is we will get we have 1,800 players spread across the United States. And we reach out to those players and we'll throw youth clinics as fundraisers, not only for More Than Baseball, in our youth program, but also the little leagues to help them. They're also a 501c3, right? So like, how can we take our platform and raise money for leagues with the agreement that it has to be a restricted grant? It has to go to maintaining fields. It has to supply scholarships for kids and families that aren't in the economical position to be able to pay $500, right? So how can we do our part with using current and former players with the idea of knowing that 300 players a year will end up getting back into coaching in some sort, right? So how do we use that platform? So I want to build a coaching certification. 4 through 19, soccer has it in Europe. Most sports are adapting to that. And I want the coaching certification to be how to teach the everyday parent what to say, how to say it, and what matters when it comes to development, because the parents care. The parents want their kids to have a better chance or to enjoy the game of baseball, right? Like that's what it's really about, is how do we make the game fun again? And it's gotten so competitive that there's such a gap between the lowest level and the next level, between travel baseball and youth baseball, like local, that this gap is creating a big fallout in that middle gap, right? Like the kids get to 8 years old and they can't make the travel select team. So I'm going to give up and do something else, right? Like, how do we make local baseball better using a coaching certification? Because the average little league parent, right? Like, and it's not their fault, right? They were taught by their mom, dad, or grandpa, right? Or coach that hadn't been taught by anybody else from 25 years ago, right? Their hearts are in the right positions, how do we fuel what they want to do, which is impact their communities? How do we do that with the right terminology, and how can we build kids up, not tear them down? And that's what I want our focus, and something that I'm halfway through getting funding for.
Awesome.
Have the team associated, and I want to go to the MLBPA and MLB or anybody and say, this is what we need to do. This is what's missing. It's
Yeah.
not about the tournament travel ball. It's about the youth baseball, because that's where the fans come from.
Yeah.
That's why it was America's pastime, right?
Yeah. So what you mentioned that like baseball is kind of dying, and I agree. If you look at the sports, the fandom, I guess, of kids, like there a lot of them are into like football or basketball, and baseball, and those two sports do a great job of like marketing, right? You'll see everywhere, everyone knows who Patrick Mahomes is, everybody knows who LeBron is, everyone knows who Steph Curry is. Baseball isn't necessarily like that. You mentioned kind of reaching the youth. Like, what do you think more than baseball would ever get, or do you think they're gonna have a focus on doing something to try to like grow the game and make the kids like make young kids like fall in love with the game again? I know you talked about coaching, but is there anything else you guys, or maybe you as a person, do you think there's something that we would do as like individuals to like really grow the game?
Yeah, we need to get the dinosaurs to adapt.
Yeah,
The
facts.
one of the big there's a lot of factors on these, right? Like one of which I saw a stat not too long ago. Not 100% of, or I think 100% of, let me get this correct. 99% of all of Tom Brady's games have been televised.
Wow.
1% of Trout's games have been televised nationally. So
Yeah.
on a national level, right? Like we football and basketball are so strong because even if you're in California, you still know that, or if you're in New York, you still know the Steph Curry because you see
Yeah,
it all the time.
that's true.
You don't have that in baseball, right? And that's due in part to the systematic, and it needs to change,
Do you
right?
think
Like,
it also has to do with the amount of games though? Because football is only on Sundays, and
yeah, but at the same time, it's the money's there, right? Like the
yeah.
teams in MLB are making the money, which means viewership is there, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know if that's it. I think it's also because there's not like a rev share model, or there is no visibility from MLBPA and the everyday person on what that TV contract looks like.
Mhm.
All we know, because they're a privately, right? They're a private company. They're not publicly traded. So all we
Yeah.
really know is they bring in and generalize numbers, but we don't know what it actually looks like. We know that they make about $500 million more every year, or 250 million more every year, right? Depending on what's happening with COVID. But we know they're making more money. And the story we don't tell is, you look at that factor of paying 25,000 people over $200,000 and paying all MLB contracts 40 man and above and still be in the positive for the year is an idea in reality we don't tell. We never say that, right? Like fans get pissed because Mike Trout holds out because he wants 400, not 350. Well, guess what? You getting mad at the player as a fan for that is just supporting the bigger elephant in the room that's doing the exact same thing, right? Like
Mhm.
they wouldn't be paying these players if they weren't generating that revenue.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Right. Like, and I don't think we look at that. It does. I get it from a fan's perspective on the player side holding out, but there's also things like arbitration and comparables and things of this nature. So like your decision isn't just your decision. It's also a trickle down effect for generations to come, because
Yeah.
when we start having colluding or holding out or whatever you want to call it, right, on contracts, when somebody, it happened to my buddy Shane Green, and this is a small example, but Shane Green was going through his second year arbitration, and I can't remember the names, but one of his comparables, he had two comparables. One of his comparables was supposed to sign for 11 or 12, ended up signing for 4 because he panicked and got really late. Well, that lost $500,000 a year right there.
Yeah.
So every time we have somebody that signs for under what they value, 10 years from now, that amount of money is multiplied by that big time. And that's just money going back to ownership.
That,
And it's something, a story that we don't share enough.
yeah.
As a sport, I think our marketing is getting better. I do think that they're starting to, but some of the rules we have and things of that nature need to adapt if we want to. We ultimately need to realize that it's entertainment.
Yeah.
And you can have entertainment and not lose the integrity of the game. And we need to do a better job of the kid in San Diego knowing who Trevor May is in New York. We need to look at it a nationwide picture, and that's my thing is we need to be looking 15 years down the road, and if we can start throwing more camps and more experiences that are getting kids and minor leaguers together, right? And if we can do it in a way that helps the minor leaguers put money in their pocket, right? Depending on where we get to with minimum wage and things of that nature. If we can do that, we can make fans, baseball players, at 8-year-old, 10-year-old, and he's going to become a fan because he was connected to a minor leaguer.
Yeah.
And the reality is that in an ideal world, we take big leaguers and do that, but there's not enough time. But
Yeah.
why aren't we using the 7,000 other players that are spread all over this country and 14 other countries? Right. That's one thing that we found out. Like we issued over 2,000 grants to 14 countries and representation of 14 countries. So like there's baseball players everywhere. How do we take a grassroots level? And that's our argument. And our plea is that let us do it. Let minor leaguers and former players let us go and do all these little clinics everywhere, because right now there's just hard for kids to play the game of baseball and have fun. So we have to rebuild the system from the ground up. And I think that starts with coaching, because a kid can come in for a weekend, right, and play with a minor leaguer that's there once or twice or maybe
Sure,
4 times
sure.
a year, right? That's 5% of that kid's life. How do we impact the other 95%? That is my opinion on how we rebuild it. Is we have to look at grassroots, and we have to look at these communities that don't have access to professional baseball.
Yeah, and I love the idea of like having, because you talk about minor league teams, they're always in, a lot of them are in like rural areas. Like Iowa has a team. They don't have a baseball team, but they have a minor league team. Wisconsin has two minor league teams, obviously the Brewers, but they have two minor league teams, and like you can connect to those because it's so personal. You're not going to be able to just go onto the field, and but you're so close to them, and they're usually able to sign autographs, and like it's such a more intimate setting. You can get to know them, and then kind of watch their progression from the minors, hopefully to the majors, and then follow their career and know that like I'm invested because one, like I went to watch this kid play and now he's in the majors and now I'm going to continue watching him. And then it kind of goes from there, which I think that's the route that like I'm more passionate about. Because like every time I interview a baseball player, like a minor leaguer, like I start cheering for their success and like now their team. Like there's like I even when the postseason's starting now, like I know guys in different team organizations for represented, and like I don't know who to cheer for, because like I want them all to get that success. So I stopped cheering for individual teams. Now I just cheer for individuals, but it's bringing me more closer to the game that I've watched since I was a kid. So like
Right.
that idea is like I love that idea. And I think there's so much more we can do about it. Like that's something I'm passionate about is just these minor leaguers getting their stories out there so people can look and like, oh, that guy plays like across the street from me. Like I can go watch him. It's like $10 for a ticket. It's like it's so cheap compared to the Yankees or the Brewers for a major league ticket. It
Right.
costs a lot of money to send a family there, but you can take a family for like $50 to a minor league game, and it's very family friendly.
And there's ways that you could do it, right? If we think about this, like let's cut spring training down 2 weeks, and let's go to a minor league location 2 weeks earlier,
Hmm.
and let's set a road trip where we go to 4 different locations around the state, and we practice and play with college kids and other teams in random locations. Why do we have to be so stuck to like so that way you're just not drawing in that one minor league community? How do we reach the entire state? Right. Like there's so many things, like what happens at the MLB level, right? Like you do Tigers Fest or whatever it might be, right? Where you travel the state for a week, hitting different locations and giving fan opportunities. And look, MLB needs to make a change, MILB needs to make a change, and players need to make a change.
Hmm.
Players aren't innocent in this either, right? Like we have to understand that as a player, we're responsible for our own careers and we're responsible for the game that we're playing.
Yeah.
We can complain at MLB, but we have to step up on the player side to make sure we understand that this game only exists because fans.
Yeah. That's a good point. I think you and I, and maybe, Simon, and we should just do a road trip through a bunch of minor league stadiums next season and just start just start interacting with fans and just meeting kids and meeting people. I think that'd be something kind of cool to do.
Yeah, well, that's one thing we're trying. We're really trying. We just did our first one with Akron.
Okay.
And it was MTB night at the field. And that was one of our first ones with minor league team. And when we're hoping that now that the union stuff is all passed and everything, like to realize that we're still here to our mission statement is to protect and enhance the game of
Yeah.
baseball. That is our mission statement. And that isn't just at the minor league level. It's not just the major league level. It's at all levels.
Hmm.
And we're here to bring the baseball community together, but to also reach out and grab the other neighbor that's not a fan. And
Yeah.
that's what we want to do. We want to save the game because we're looking 10, 15 years down the road and building a grassroots program to make sure that every kid that wants to play the game of baseball not only gets the opportunity to, and we hear a lot about the opportunity to play, but
Yeah.
let's also make sure that they're having fun when they get the opportunity to play.
Absolutely.
And that's where I believe that coaching is big, is we've gotten to the point where we understand that kids are losing the opportunity to play and we're trying to fix it.
Yeah.
I asked that. Like, yes, let's keep doing that, but let's do that and let's make sure that the new kids you are and all these efforts are getting kids in. Let's make sure they're having fun and they want to keep doing it.
Yeah. That's for sure. Let's kind of end on this. You talked about connecting players and kids and fans. More than baseball gaming. Is that something will we see again sometime soon?
Man, I
Like
wanted
minor
to.
league baseball players, they game a lot, and like there's a ton of them
Yeah,
who play a
so
lot of base games and stuff.
it really just came down to a funding question because what happens is with gaming and connectivity and things of that nature and the season, things of that nature, it makes a challenge when they're playing to get on. And the streaming
Yeah.
space really wants all the time, right? But we have players like Trevor May and Blake Snell. And I agree. Like I would say that 25% of baseball players are gaming.
Hmm.
And I would like to, it really just comes down to the funding, right? Like if we get enough funding to launch a program and get people on board and things of that nature, it'd be great. And we had it for a while. We were running weekly and bi-weekly competitions and got up to where we had 50, 60 players on every single week doing games. And a lot of it wasn't publicized because we were still trying to build and launch and things of that nature. And then unfortunately, our gaming director that I had, that was a player in the Cubs organization, Garrett Kelly,
Hmm.
getting released and having to take a job. And it's just one of those things that we just needed more funding to be able to make it happen. But I do think that long term there will be a focus on it because MLBPA is putting money behind it. So the gaming will continue. There's just too many kids into gaming to
Yeah.
not. Um, it's just and there's also the tough challenging things, right? Because guess what? The number one game played really is that it brings in money. Call of Duty,
Yeah.
which is a shooting game, right? So we run through that challenge as well as that as a brand, you always have to be
Sure.
very careful of that, right? And you have to understand that of an 8-year-old shouldn't be playing Call of Duty, and if we're promoting younger kids to get on and play Call of Duty and things of that nature, are we sending the right message,
That's a
right?
good
So
point.
there's a lot of challenges from the branding side. Um, that we have to take into account as we're focusing on youth baseball as well. And there's just not enough people that watch MLB the show, right?
Yeah.
So it's just that's the challenge with the gaming side. So we like Logitech came on as a partner and sent out gear to all of our ambassadors, cameras, things of that nature, which was awesome. And something that we've had some more pressing items on, but eventually getting a Rolodex of gamers onto our website so people can just find them. All we want to do is more baseball. Is we don't care about more than baseball. We care that more than baseball is connecting every single person to that minor leaguer. Our
Yeah.
mission is not more than baseball, folks. It's this is how you go and play with Garrett Kelly because
Hmm.
that's what matters. So that's one of our missions is trying to create opportunities, and it's just for us and our team. And I look, we've done this basically as volunteers for almost 4 years now.
Hmm.
And it's also where we're all in the place where we have to make sure that we're all financially getting there. So we have to be very selective of the time that we put in
Yeah.
because we do it all as volunteer.
Yeah.
We always have outside of some small things here or there. But yeah, I mean, we've raised, a little under $1.5 million, and we're finalizing our audits for the last 2 years right now. And it's going to show that almost 97 cents of every dollar has gone out.
That's so
So
cool.
it's something we're really proud of.
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, like, I mean, I want to thank you for coming on. I know you're a busy guy, and like I said, we've been working to get this on for for a couple of
And
weeks now here, or a month or so, but finally able to get you on. So I do appreciate you taking your time
yeah,
to come on. And like honestly, like More Than Baseball has been promoting my podcast, and like I talked to Simon, like I said, all I do is just interview predominantly minor leaguers. I think I had like a content creator for baseball on just recently, but like 98% is just like minor leaguers and guys who've been minor leaguers in the past and just
right.
sharing their story and just grinding with them. So it's pretty sick that you guys are helping out with that too. But yeah, man, like it's been good being able to like talk to you and kind of pick your brain a little bit about something that you're passionate about and something I am as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for the opportunity.